I have become more and more convinced as I go through life that nothing on the inside can be addressed by changes on the outside unless you are conscious of the connection. For example, I am doing this because I don't deserve to be in an abusive relationship. And that is why I'm going to leave this man. I'm saying to that child inside me, enough. We went through this with Dad when I was a kid. I always wondered, why didn't Mom leave?
This is Safe Passage, where we invite you to explore the internal journey of transformation and change.
Whether it's relocation or retirement, the birth of a child, or the loss of a loved one, life invites us, sometimes forces us, to evolve.
So where do you turn when you feel stuck or unsure of what's next? I'm Doug Ota.
And I'm Nikki Muller. Welcome to Safe Passage. Life transitions is a skill we all must master, and believe me, this is easier said than done. Doc Doug is a transitions expert, a psychologist, educator, and researcher. But no matter how much you know about transitions or how well you master them, they still have a way of throwing us curveballs from time to time. I'm currently in the thick of a major transition myself, trying to understand how the next chapter of my life should look like and how it's going to bring meaning and purpose. I've had to begin again countless times in my life, but this time around, as I've just turned 40, the stakes feel much higher. Life's transitions can feel like you're in free fall, you've been ejected from the driver's seat, but recognizing when we are in transition is the essential step. But that can often feel confusing without proper support and awareness. Giving ourselves time and space to swim in the murky, uncertain waters is crucial, but, it's also counterintuitive. Being curious to lean in while concurrently not understanding exactly what is going on internally and why can be scary. And that's what Safe Passage is for. We ask some big questions without necessarily always having the answer, but trusting that this is a safe place where we can open up about some of life's disruptions while always holding on to that proverbial silver lining. So I want to jump right in with the author Bruce Feiler's work, which we're going to use as a launchpad for today's conversation. He writes, "The nonlinear life involves many more life transitions. The linear life is dead." So his stance is that we're primed to expect that our lives are going to follow a predictable path, and then we're thrown off when they don't. So, Doc Doug, pray tell, what do you think he means when he says the linear life is dead? What are some examples of this today so we can wrap our heads around this?
Well, I wonder if it was ever really alive, is the first answer I would give. I think we would like to believe that there's such a thing as a linear life, but I don't think nature agrees. And I think we were allowed to I think what he's probably referring to is for a long time, society were better sort of set up so that people could sort of do the same thing for a long time. The classic idea of having one employer
Yes.
that, say, our grandfathers grew up with. And they worked there for 40 years and retired. There was a period of time where that was normal and where people grew up on the same farm that their grandfather had worked, and they worked that farm and that was their life. And in our industrial society, that's gotten less and less and less true as the pace has picked up. And so what used to maybe appear for a time as normal it would be absolutely exceptional these days to hear about somebody living a life like that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think we all do, right? These were unrealistic, kind of outdated cultural experiences. That traditional path you're talking about of one career trajectory, the idea of you go to school, maybe you go to college, you get that career path, and maybe you buy a house, you get married, maybe you have children. It's safe to say, like you said, that these cultural norms are not indicative of today's realities anymore. But he talks about how some aspects of our lives can be linear, whilst others are not. And this morning, I was just thinking about it as I was brewing on this question. And I realized that my life has felt at least nonlinear from the very beginning. So I think you're on the money there that this never may have ever really been the case, at least in our generation. And I looked at in what ways has my life felt nonlinear? And I I worked before college. Some people work before college so that they can afford college. I was very blessed. My parents could afford college, so I chose to work first. That was something I wanted to do, right? So working at MTV, and then I landed kind of the dream job. Still the best experience ever was working for Disney as one of the presenters on their flagship show that was regional, which meant at 17 years old, I could afford a car, which a lot of 17-year-olds couldn't. And I
Wow.
was making, decent money at the time.
Hmm.
Um, and and then my first nomination as a TV presenter at the Asian Television Awards came in before college. I was 20 years old, and I thought this morning, I went, "Oh my God, did I peak early? Is this it? I need help, doctor, help me!" Right? I was like, "Okay, Nikki, this is a little too nonlinear." I got married a little later in life. I don't think there's such thing as late in life, but some people would say 38, a bit later, right? I do not own a house. I've decided to live child-free. That's my decision, and I want to start a completely new career at 40. I think nonlinear should be my next
Wow.
tattoo. What do you think, Doc Doc?
That sounds good and nonlinear, right? Wonderful. Wonderful.
So I think you're on the money. That's what life is like for now. That might sound extreme for some people, but what Feiler said was, and I like how he described it. He says life is really this complex swirl of celebrations, setbacks, triumphs, and rebirths, right? So instead of that straight line, it's kind of filled with a lot of plot twists and
Yep.
a lot of course corrections.
Yeah. Well, I think we kid ourselves that it's anything but that. The Buddhists talk about you can't stick your hand in the same river twice.
Mm.
The water's flowing all the time. We cling at our own peril. It's sort of a natural human inclination, but that's why the Buddhists also talk about clinging being the source of all suffering. If we try to hold on to anything that is fluidly organic without remembering that there's actually very few straight lines in nature.
Mm. Mm.
Maybe there's not even any if you actually look on a big enough scale. Everything is curved and organic.
Oh, I love that. There are no straight lines in nature.
Well, can you think of one?
No, I'm thinking right now because I'm looking outside and I'm going, you're absolutely right. Any kind of road that is straight was man-made.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
I really love how you phrase that. And I think that hits the nail on the head when we talk about non-linearity.
Nails are
Is
straight.
that a word? It's so straight.
If they're any good, but they're man-made. Yep.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a statement that I really like that I think can maybe help some of us understand when we are in transition, that in between those major milestones in our life. And Feiler says that it's when at least one aspect of your life feels like it's off schedule, quote unquote, off schedule. So I think that's a skill to master, understanding what transitions look like and feel like to you personally. So I'm wondering if there's a recent moment that comes to mind where an aspect of your life felt off schedule. How did you recognize and navigate this?
I would say the entirety of my 20s and 30s.
Wow. I'm just gonna be quiet here because I think you got to tell us more.
Well, on the one hand, I
That's a
became
big
a
one.
father early.
Mm.
When my wife and I got married, I was 24, and we were going to have our first kid when I was 25, and he was born when I was 26. At that time, in the organization I was working at, the American School of The Hague, there was, there were very, very few people my age, much less anybody having kids. And the norm then was you have kids in your 30s, 40s. And here I am doing something that seemed kind of 19th century. Also to my parents. And our decision was we wanted to start early, and then we'd have, time after the kids were grown up. But it just sounded like fun, so we did it. But what also felt off schedule was this idea that I had that I needed to be in graduate school in the United States at the age of 22, 23, whatever, and working on a PhD, which I defended only when I was 54 years old. I tried to do a PhD at 2 different times in my 20s and 30s, and that's very hard to combine with 3 kids. And all along, it felt like I'd missed that boat. I'm stuck in international education. What am I doing here? Little did I know I was accruing this expertise, which has since then become Safe Passage, and all things Safe Passage span this podcast. So life sometimes is, no, life is always doing more with us than we can ever know. And off schedule is a man-made term. Off schedule is based on assumptions of what the right schedule should be. It's the wrong question. It's the wrong adjective, or at least it implies that we should be in control. We should be calling the shots. And there's just so many things that we are not doing that about. And it's sometimes, in my experience, more important to give yourself permission to reflect on, I don't understand this yet. That can be very difficult, especially if it lasts for your 20s and 30s.
Yeah.
But trusting something's getting worked out here. And lo and behold, it certainly did. I really, really, and I want to say this in emphatic terms, I thought I was wasting my life at lots of points in my 20s and 30s. Little did I know that the work I was doing kind of in the margins of my job on paper was going to become so important to me and to lots of other people, apparently.
Thank you for sharing that, Doug. That gives me so much comfort hearing that, because that really resonates with me too. When I think back at sort of two big life transitions, it's not necessarily that things were off schedule, but they definitely just something felt off. I think that's what it is. Just something didn't feel right internally. And so there's two very clear life transitions, and they're about 15 years apart, where the feeling was, I'm not understanding what the problem is, but I know there's some kind of problem. And actually, when I say problem, it was big feelings that I should have leaned into and been curious about. And eventually, it led me to make some pretty big decisions to break away from a life that no longer served me. And this is really confusing, because when you actually feel this way, you look at your life and you go, but hey, it's business as usual. Work is okay. Work is good. Work is consistent. Relationships are fine. The world looks normal. But why does something feel off, right? Nothing about my life had changed on the surface. So it was a transition that you couldn't finally place, unlike when, let's say, you lose a job, which is so mega, right? All of a sudden, it's so destabilizing. You worry about your financial security and your identity, or if your company is taken over, if there's a merger, that's huge for identity and meaning making for an entire group of people, right? Or if you leave a marriage and you know that you were in a partnership, how do I know how to be on my own? Those are events that you can place. I feel this way because X happened. But for me, the big transitions were, I suppose, what folks would consider developmental transitions, almost like internal esoteric, right? Because the perspective inside was shifting. I couldn't understand that. I knew something was changing in me. What was important in the past may not be. And I think it sounds very similar to what you were saying of, does this work have meaning? Am I doing the right thing? Am I wasting my time? There must be more. I'm meant to do more. I'm meant to give more. And that led to this current crazy trend. I say crazy because it feels a lot. It's not crazy. It's the right thing to do. But it feels like a lot.
Maybe you should
40.
remind, if people didn't hear those episodes, you should just say something about what that is, briefly. Huh?
Yes. So the first transition, and I'm going to talk about the first transition in a bit and how that looked like and felt like. That was 15 years ago. I left a stable job in New York City at the United Nations to move to Singapore and continue to pursue a career in television, with no place to live and no job, right? In the middle of a financial crisis. So that was a lot of risk. And fast forward now, I just turned 40, and I felt these feelings again, the uncertainty around what was changing within me and what does that mean for the next chapter of my life. I felt that again a few years ago, and it was because of SPAN, Safe Passage Across Networks. It's because of this globally mobile, highly cultural community. It's because of the course that I took that Doug and his colleagues have run, called the Laws of Transitions course, that I started to understand that these feelings of uncertainty were actually a completely normal event that we all go through, but it's very difficult and uncertain, called transition. And so I've decided to move to Switzerland at the age of 40 to park the career that I've built for so long to see whether I can lean into a transitions career and hopefully still marry some of the things I used to do with what's next. Sort of what you just said, in the margins of your life, things that you were doing already helped you to accrue the expertise and the insights to really connect the dots later on in this stage of your life where the PhD is done and amazing and you're doing great things and helping so many people. So hopefully that clarified some things.
Wonderful. Absolutely. And
eh,
gutsy too. It
mm,
attests to your standing at the top of that cliff and jumping into the water. Everybody knows that feeling if you've ever done that. Oh my goodness, am I really going to do this? Yeah. But
yeah.
it's not the things that we do that we regret, right? It's the things we don't do. Yeah.
You're so right. You're so right about that. So, in the spirit of sharing about the internal kind of transition, when it's not necessarily a life throwing a specific disruptive event your way, can you remember a moment where you were changing inside, similar to that, or is it that the fact that you felt that in your career you weren't doing what you were meant to be doing, or it wasn't good enough, it wasn't getting you where you needed to be?
So can I recognize a feeling like you had that launched you into those two big transitions um, where I felt kind of that turmoil, huh?
Yes, and it was it was a transition that was not based on an external disruption or
Mm-hmm.
event. It was something you
Mm-hmm.
knew you were changing in some way.
I think the way I'd answer that is colored by how I think about it now.
Hmm.
I think I've learned to tolerate and to try to tolerate that discomfort on the inside, probably because of my first therapist at the age of 26, 25, when I was thinking about taking the entire family from The Hague to the States at one of a number of graduate programs that I was going to launch myself and my trailing family into. And he helped me really think about, do you really want to do that? And my wife was willing, but only wanted to if I was absolutely sure that this was worth all of the trouble and the turmoil. And uh, something that he said stuck and has stuck ever since, which is, or would you be doing the Geographic? And this applies to me. I'm not saying it applies to your stories, but it's worth thinking about, and it's troubling. I said, what do you mean by a Geographic? And he said, are you trying to change something on the outside in order to address something on the inside?
The only thing that really changes is your zip code.
Yeah. And it's that classic idea of wherever you go, there you are.
Yeah.
You bring yourself. And I reflected on, and I have in the decades since, there's so many examples of men my age, getting a sports car and a new wife. There's lots of different versions of that. And if it is an attempt to find a shortcut around something on the inside that's asking for our attention, it's bound to not work. And that has actually probably been one of the big reasons why I've stayed put in a lot of ways. And because of the work I do, sort of like, what is this about, Doug? What is this about? I'm not saying that it's necessarily the right answer. And I think recent events have taught me that there's way more going on the inside, even than I was aware of, even when I was trying to pay attention to it. But I have become more and more convinced as I go through life that nothing on the inside can be addressed by changes on the outside unless you are conscious of the connection. For example, I am doing this because I don't deserve to be in an abusive relationship. And that is why I'm going to leave this man. I'm saying to that child inside me, enough. We went through this with Dad when I was a kid. I always wondered, why didn't Mom leave? I'm in my second abusive relationship. I'm getting you out of here. If you're not aware of that and you just leave and you're looking for the next, say, guy, or it could be a woman if you're a man, or if you're gay, it could be another man with a man, etc., etc. The point is, do you see the connection? And I think that's I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I think that's my answer to your question.
Yeah. No, I like where we went with this. And, before I made this move recently to Switzerland, I had wanted to make that conscious decision of staying put so that I wouldn't repeat the patterns of this childhood that was highly mobile and all the difficulties that came with it because those transitions were unsupported. I wanted to be very clear that when I move, should I choose to move again, it's because it's the right thing to do, not because it's the only thing I know how to do. And my friends asked me that too. They said, "So Nikki, you want to change your career path. Why do you need to move to Switzerland for that?" And there are many there's a lot of reasons why it has to be here and why it felt right. But one of the most important things were if I am in the same environment where work is coming my way, I am not the type of person to say no to work. Work means financial security. And the more and more I say yes to these gigs, the less time I'm going to spend really working on what's happening internally. I can see it. I can see it going for another 10 years, another 20 years, and not really doing what I meant to do. And I'm lucky in the sense that I was able to make this leap, right? A lot of people can't leave their environment or just move to another country and take however long off to figure out the next chapter. I'm very, very blessed in this case.
I think that's a great example, Nikki, of a mindful move.
Mm,
And I like how you said that there are people who stay on the road because it's what they know how to do.
yeah.
The people who you're sort of saying that you made this move in order to create space, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That sounds
So
mindful.
thank you. Thank you. So I'm glad that you reminded me of that and sort of affirmed that direction, that if you make that connection, like you said, as long as you make that connection, when you make a change like this and not just use it as your modus operandi as a way of coping. And speaking of coping, here's another kind of link that I only recently discovered. I'm very late to the game, Doc Doug. I'm having so many epiphanies and realizations because of the work we're doing together. So I want to just thank you. But I do feel like, okay, Nikki, how did it take you so long to figure these things out? But I wanted to
I think
talk
we're
to
all
you.
saying that.
Yeah? Okay, I guess it's honest, isn't it? It's real. It's honest.
I've given up beating myself over the head with it just because I know that when I'm, universe willing, 65, I'm going to be going, oh yeah, that's what you thought when you were 55. I noticed I was doing that when I was 20 towards my 18-year-old self, and it's never stopped.
Yeah, that's fair. So, yeah, before I was aware of this world of transitions as being obviously completely natural and an area of study that's so crucial if we want to maximize the opportunities that disruption gives us, I had to find a coping mechanism for the overwhelm. Those feelings I was telling you internally that I couldn't understand. I just knew something was wrong. And both of those sort of major life transitions, 15 years ago leaving New York, flash forward to now coming to Switzerland and changing careers again, I think not on a conscious level, the way I resorted was to overeating. So I am an emotional eater. And I learned this when I quit that job in the UN and went to a weight loss retreat in the USA. I learned that there are 7 types of eaters. We'd all like to be the mindful eater, but that is not me. I use food, and I'm always going to be an emotional eater. Once you are, you always will be, right? In times of stress, I use food as instant gratification as a way to suppress uncomfortable feelings or uncomfortable feelings that I certainly did not understand. And what was so interesting was the moment I had made the decision to leave New York and to start a new direction and to commit to that, despite the fact that it was a financial crisis and there was no guarantee. But the moment that I had that clarity, then I started to pay attention to my food. Then I started to exercise, and the weight came off. 35 kilos that I had gained
Wow.
came off once I understood that the transition phase was coming to a new beginning. But of course, I didn't know any of that, right? But what's crazy or interesting is about 3 years ago when I started to feel the same discomfort of something's not sitting right. I know there's more to this. I can be of value elsewhere, but I don't know what's happening. Why am I feeling this way? I started to eat again. The emotional eater took over again, and I gained every single one of those kilos back within 3 years, the 35. So when I'm in transition, if I am not aware that what this feeling is and this moment is transition, I resort to eating. That's what I am, and there's people in my family who are too. And so if I saw that's how people coped with stressful feelings, then of course it's natural that I did the same. So I'm wondering for you in your practice, I'm sure you've seen this, people who use different coping strategies to deal with those big feelings. I mean, what are some of the other ways you've seen this? And maybe you can share what your own default coping mechanism was like before you developed the positive strategies that you know so well now?
Sure. So when I grew up, I avoided everything. I had no
Everything.
other options. There weren't a whole lot of good coping skills that got taught where I came from. And I discovered you could just avoid them. And that seemed to work pretty darn well on the short term. And of course, not on the long term. I think one of my first mentors, Diana Glant, was this wonderful, wise, far older psychologist as I came into the field. And she said something to me that was totally enigmatic at the time. She said, our basic needs are pretty simple. And when those are taken care of, everything's all is well. She was talking about a roof over your head, food, love, belonging, acceptance, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, basically. And then people get on with their lives. But when something is wrong in that picture, especially on the acceptance and love levels, then the human psyche is infinitely creative in how it attempts to find ways to cope with that. There are patterns, and many of them are captured in the DSM-5, but those are, in my mind, just simply patterns of how people are trying to cope with what you appropriately keep calling big feelings. They are there. You need to know how to deal with them. If you don't, you'll find some other way of learning how to deal with them. But the best way is to be able to use the feelings as they're coming up and to be listened to, seen, soothed, helped to feel safe. And that empathy then helps us feel calm and we move on. The lucky people get that. You could say the 60% who are, say, secure in their mindset about attachment would, say, roughly be comfortable with that idea, one could argue. And then there's the 40% of the rest of us. And I would say that number is actually growing. I think if some new meta-analytic studies worldwide, generation or two after those first studies in the mid-90s were to again be performed, I don't think we're moving in a direction that's good for our sense of security.
Yeah, I completely understand and empathize with that. We do what we must in a sort of survival instinct if we don't know any other way, or we haven't seen a healthy approach to it, or we don't have, like you say, a role model, right, to kind of emulate of how to deal with some difficult
And if I could just say
things.
a little more personal
Yeah.
about that, that's what was modeled for me, was
Mm.
don't deal with it. Get away from it. Make it go away. And if necessary, leave.
Ah.
And I got that modeled for me right early at the top of the stairs in my Snoopy pajamas as I watched my dad at the age of 3 walk out the door. And that makes an impression. That teaches a kid, if you don't say anything about it and it never gets talked about, I guess this is how we deal with things.
Yes.
And okay, got it. That's what we'll do. And that's what I proceeded to try to do for at least the first 20 years of my life.
I think that's so interesting. When did the turning point happen? Because for considering that that was how you grew up and what you deemed even in your own body as the way things get handled, when did you decide actually to explore the area of psychology? Because we look at you now, people from the outside will say, but he's such a wise, grounded man who understands the way in which we should healthily, positively process some of these bigger things. And yet we listen to everything you've gone through and all the challenges that you've gone through, and you turned the pain and the wounds into an incredible life of healing others as well. Like, I'm just curious, jumping in here, when did that happen? When did you realize I can build a life and a future by learning how we can do things differently and how I can do things differently for myself too?
I think I was also modeled that, first of all, we're all figuring it out
Mm-hmm.
constantly. And even very recently, I was in the throes of figuring out some very big stuff. So don't fall for the appearance that it's all sorted, because it never is, and it never was, and it won't be. But you keep working at it. And I suppose my life has taught me there's basically two kinds of people. There's those who, we said we weren't going to swear on our podcast, but I'm going to use one word because it just is kind of necessary. There's people who deal with the shit, and there's people who pass it on.
Wow. Ah, yes.
And even if you're trying to deal with it, you must be aware with some humility that inevitably you're still going to pass some on.
Mm-hmm.
I know my wife and I have. I also know we have tried very mindfully, to the best of our ability, not to. But I think that's fair of almost all parents. Nobody wants to pass their shit on. Most parents come into parenting with, oh, it's going to be so much wonder. It's going to be so wonderful. And it's going to be so different. I'm not going to be the kind of mom, dad that I had, whatever. And how many of those parents, to their horror, myself included, find the very same words, the very same experiences of their kids, of them, reminding them echo upon echo of you are being your father, you are being your mother. That said, you can have a sincere intention to work on yourself and to try to sort out the stuff so that it stops with, as much as possible, with your generation. And that's why I call the people who dare to consult with somebody like me. At some point in therapy, I'll often tell them that they're one of the heroes. They say, yeah, but I've still made such a mess of my family. Look at how my kids are still so troubled. I say, do you have any idea what would have happened if you hadn't come these last 5 years?
Wow.
And nobody will know, but genuine work on oneself never is for naught and always leads to less pain being passed on. And my life and my career, I believe, is a product of reflecting on that as I saw, why is there so much pain all around me in my family? What is going on here? And as I watched my father walk and walk and walk, get divorced, get remarried again, get divorced, remarried again, get divorced, get remarried again. I never said this to him, but I said, Dad, your third Susan? In 4 marriages, my mom was named Susan? Is there anything going on here?
So all 3 women he married were named Susan?
3 of 4 were married Susan, and my mother's name is Susan. Now,
Oh,
what is
wow.
the statistical likelihood of that? It's basically 0. This is a 5 sigma thing, as physicists say, where you say that is unusual. That is a signal. But the inner life did not exist for him in any public way. Not that he would share with me very often at all, except in glimmers. And I was absolutely convinced that his unresolved things and my mom's had really, really, really clogged things up for my brother and me. And my brother didn't survive. And I almost didn't repeatedly. And that is humbling. And it simply means, I believe, sometimes there's so much manure piled on our heads that, yeah, we could still get a rose to grow out of this, but it's going to be a lot of work.
Yeah.
And then when you do start to see roses appearing, it is extremely encouraging. I carry around in my wallet Chinese fortune from a cookie that I unpacked when my wife and I were in Princeton. It was just before graduation, and we were at a Chinese restaurant, and my cookie was, and I'm going to cry when I say this, but it says, because I still have it in this wallet, I've carried it around for 35 years almost, said, "You will have happiness, peace and harmony in your home." And that's been sort of my North Star. And it hasn't always worked, but it's been my decision. Doggone it. As much of this stuff is going to stop with me and my family as possible. Little did I know that would become a wider theme, I think, in this work in general, because I think that's what I discovered in working at schools was, oh my gosh, this is really hard here. What's going on here? And I simply learned to use my own experience as a template and go, wait a minute, is anybody else going through this? I'm feeling pretty bewildered as I come over here to the Netherlands and try to work at an international school. Anybody else like feeling this? And nobody was really talking about it. And luckily there were people who were willing to start to dialogue about that. And that's where this work really started to gain some traction. Well, yeah, I didn't know I was going to go there, but there's my answer to you using, I'm glad it was worth using the one 4-letter word because it leads to all of this.
It leads to all of this. And thank you very much for sharing that. And I think that's very beautiful that you have that you still have that as a reminder of something that you have always desired, and most importantly, something you have always deserved. So I'm really, really glad that you shared that.
All of us do, including our parents and their parents and their parents before. Nobody deserves to suffer. And yet the suffering is an invitation to all of us to stop and say, what is this trying to tell me?
Yes.
And I do believe that I'm not a big believer in human progress when it comes to technologies and things like that. I don't know that we're necessarily living better lives than, say, choose your period of history.
We're living more complicated, faster lives, but certainly not more connected lives.
But
or better lives,
I do think that we are starting to make a turn in societies around the world where you're starting to hear a movement towards connectedness, that we are not atomistic selves that should just be all pursuing our own happiness, that actually the deep satisfaction comes through things that the ancient peoples understood in their bones, the connectedness. We are rediscovering things that I think the native peoples just knew, that everything is connected. And then we apply some scientific weight to that, and we say, whoa, look at what we're discovering. We're rediscovering.
Yes, you're absolutely right. We're rediscovering, and we can maybe feel better about it, because if the science and the data backs it up, then of course, something that our elders and our forefathers knew thousands of years ago, can now be proven. I think I agree with you there. That's
Mhm.
where we're at. But one of the things you're talking about is kind of understanding the rose is the element of the fact that life transitions, I suppose, are really designed as a way to find meaning and purpose in disruption. And I'm really glad that you recommended one of, you had a book list of recommendations after the Laws of Transitions course, and then I picked up Bruce Feiler's Life is in the Transitions. And for those who haven't read it, it's really based on his Life Stories project, where he interviewed hundreds of people from across 50 states whose life was up, or lives, I should say, were upended in some way. Again, to try and find meaning in this. And I think it was just a project of tell me your story as open and honestly as you can, whatever you'd like to share. So people did that, and it could be someone who had major health complications, whether it's losing a loved one, financial woes, relationship strains, because as Doug always says, every life transition, especially the ones that shake us, is really disguised as an opportunity for growth. So he discovered quite a few patterns, Bruce Feiler did, and similarities between these stories, which I found interesting. He called them kind of a deck of disruptors, and if, right, that's a fact of life, and they roll in their own schedule.
Yep.
And he found that we go through about 3 dozen disruptors in our lifetime, okay, most of which we can go through kind of with ease, and this happens around every 12 to 18 months. But what really stood out for me was that 1 in 10 becomes a life quake, meaning the major disruptions that really destabilize us. And on average, we're going through that about 3 to 5 times in our life. And the average duration he has found through his data was about 5 years. So we're spending about 25 years in transition, which, if you look at it, is almost half of our adult lives.
Mm.
That's huge. Now, granted, this is a beautiful, beautiful work and project, but it's only the United States. Is it reflective of the rest of the world? I don't know, but I would assume there must be some similarities. But I thought that was really powerful. Does this sound about right to you, Doug, that we spend half of our adult lives in transition? Because if this is the case, it blows my mind that so many of us still don't know how to master this life skill, or how to even recognize that it's happening.
Yeah, I think it sounds right. I don't think it's anything we ever master, and I think there's probably some differences between collectivist societies and more individualistic societies. I think some of the intensity he's describing we do to ourselves because of these more modern lives that we're leading. If you are in a more communal society, and I'm not saying that this is the life we should lead or aspire to, or that I would even want, but where you're close to your tribe. Not so many people are coming and going. It's a very traditional
Mm.
approach to life. That's going to shelter you from some of this. But I'd actually also, as I was thinking about your question, would want to say that Feiler's number probably is conservative, even in an
Mm.
industrialized society, because it's, again, implying that the quiet times are the normal times. And again, that river is always flowing. It's
Yes.
never, even in the quietest parts of the river, it's moving. It's not as dramatic as in the rapids or at the waterfalls. But a river is a great analogy
Mhm.
for this, that stasis, when things truly are stuck, then you get foul water,
Yeah.
unless there's an
Yes.
ecosystem around it, like a pond or a lake. But just put some water in a bucket in your backyard and watch what happens to it, or
Yes.
or yesterday's
Yes.
soup. It's not
Yep.
pretty. Um,
I love how you do that, Doug. You have this beautiful superpower of explaining some really kind of difficult ideas or truths in this beautiful poetic way. You are such a wordsmith, and you're so great at painting imagery that we can all just access and go, aha,
yeah,
that
thank
makes
you.
sense. So I
That's
really appreciate that. I love talking with you because I'm so opposite. I would love to get better at the poetry of it all. I'm so matter of fact, and I think that's also my work. My work, at least, in live television, when you have 1 minute and 15 seconds to tell a story before you're cut off, all sides of the story. So I've trimmed the fat for so long as my default way of communicating,
Yeah.
that when I hear you in this way, I go, geez, that speaks right to my nervous system. So thank you very much for the reminder. I really appreciate
Well,
that
it's
and the
not
way
for
in which you tackle this.
it's not for everybody, and if both of us were like this, we wouldn't maybe have as effective of a podcast.
It would
I,
be 6 hours each episode.
I need the way that you anchor us and keep us on target, and provide the structure that is somewhat structureless in the panoply of metaphors that I'm known to
Oh, but I
use.
love it.
Yeah,
I really thank you. So I just wanted to say that it's something that you
thanks.
do so well, and I really enjoy. I'm going to skim through one of these other data points just so we can kind of move along here. But
Mm.
one of the things that were discovered in this life story project was that quite a few people initiated their own life quakes. Right, this is the stuff that really destabilizes you. Right. Oh, I don't even think I talked about the life quakes because I went right straight into it.
Mm.
Um, um, did we talk about life
Not really.
quakes?
I don't think you touched on that
No, I
actual
think it's
phrase, which is
yes.
a great phrase of his. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Well, go ahead. Yeah. So a life quake is a kind of like the 1 in 10 of these disruptors that we go through in our life is considered a life quake. That's something that he had a term that he had coined. And those are the really tough ones, the ones that kind of throw us off kilter, that really hold gravitas, that make a huge difference. But that's the thing. When he said that several people that he had spoken to were in charge of their own disruption, as it voluntarily disrupted their own lives, whether it was changing jobs, countries, or just doing something completely different, walking away from something, etc. The fact that they initiated their own life quakes to me was very, very fascinating, and because that's kind of what I've done, but just fascinating that many people do this. And I'm just wondering what your take. Does this surprise you that we would initiate our own major disruptions? And if it doesn't surprise you, why not? Because I think it's almost contradictory to our survival instinct for, those needs of safety and security. What would you say?
Mm-hmm. It doesn't surprise me, but I think it's really, really important to focus on the individual level of what's the meaning of the quake for the person. Why? What is the intention behind causing it? If you're running from the inside by changing something on the outside again, then that's what my old therapist called a geographic.
Mm.
You're trying to manipulate the outside to address something on the inside, and that does not work. But if the
Yeah.
intention is to honor something on the inside, and only the person knows, because we're also very good at telling ourselves stories and telling other people stories to justify. I'm convinced that only the person themselves knows whether this is honest. And is this truly a response to something that is needed on the inside? Because oftentimes just honoring that is already an action, a sufficient action.
Mm.
It reminds me of oftentimes husbands, sometimes wives saying, "But I didn't do anything." And I say, "Yes, you did. You listened to her." It's such an eye-opener that just listening could be not only helpful, but the most helpful. I didn't need you to do it for me. I just needed you to listen to me. How many partners say that to their spouse? Is that any different with our inner lives, with our inner needs? Once it's really been heard and understood, is there any outward action even necessary? I'm not saying there's not. There could well be. Again, that abuse example I used earlier. But it might change the equation and say, maybe I just need to keep doing this, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that makes so much sense. It's the awareness of it, of like you said earlier, what's really going on here? What
And
is this trying to tell me?
you just used the magic word that the great healers, minds, yogi use, which is awareness.
Mm.
Once you are aware and you're trying to stay near awareness, being aware of, why am I doing this? Being aware that you're even thinking, that you're the one that can watch your own thinking. Your thoughts are not real. The person that you are when you're quiet is what's real. The thoughts can
Yeah.
come and go, even though they might seem so compelling. That's just your mind going blah, 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 blah.
Wow. That really that landed for me what you said. Your thoughts are not real. The person who you are when it's quiet, that's real. I
Yeah.
That really, I don't know. That just really works for me because I'm quiet a lot.
Yeah.
And you're right. There's no USB plug to my brain where someone can say, "Well, this is me."
And
Right? It's just you sitting in these feelings and thoughts for so long, and that's the real you. Yeah.
our society makes it so hard just to be still. And yet that's where truth always is. It's not in the noise.
Yes. Yes.
Something about life quake too, which is interesting to think about, which is sometimes I think the earth is all just one big metaphor trying to tell us important things. Someday I want to, well, actually I've already started, but I want to write a book about what different natural systems are actually saying about our inner lives. And
Oh, I would
quakes,
love to read that.
a lot of it
Yes.
is about water and about rivers. So you've heard me kind of talking that way. But the quakes is a good one because seismologists will tell us that quakes happen when resistance has built up
Yes.
and when the plates have not been able to slide smoothly and
Mhm.
something's getting in the way and it's building up and it's building up. I mean, I grew up in California, relatively near the San Andreas Fault, that thing that says it's going to be spitting us towards Japan sometime in the next hundreds of thousands of years. So I grew up with this way of thinking, but it is true that if resistance builds up, and we can do that internally too by not letting things just flow and trying to live that linear life and clinging to things and not paying attention to our own feelings, which are trying to flow and tell us, if we keep repressing that, eventually, boom, something has to give. And that might also be how those quakes occur. Some might be, of course, I mean, sometimes just meteors hit the earth, right? But sometimes we could be contributing to that by how we are living.
Yes, that we increase the pressure on the tectonic plates on all fronts until, like you say, something's got to give.
By holding on to certain ideas, by resisting things we know to be true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's beautiful that you said that, and it leads well to Feiler's kind of description of the life quake, which is a massive burst of change that leads to a period of upheaval, transition, and renewal. And so we're really talking about the discomfort of transitions and big disruptors, but that ultimate goal again is to grow through what you go through. And
Oh, I
so
like that.
you
Is that
like
one you've
that?
used before? That's new to my ears, Nikki. To
Yeah.
grow through what you go through.
Yeah.
Whoa.
I've been saying that for years. I think it's always landed really well for me, and now it seems to make even more sense whilst I'm in the throes of transition. But as per usual, our conversation has led us to some unexpected places, and I am really glad that we're leading into these moments because here's what I learned from talking with you today. You've helped me to connect the dots between the complexity of our feelings when we're in transition and how we were taught to deal with discomfort as children, right? The modeling of our parents and caregivers around how they dealt with challenging feelings is directly linked to our thoughts and our actions in adulthood when transitions thrust us into the uncomfortable. So when that discomfort comes up, that pause actually really matters. It might be a bit confusing, maybe it's even a bit scary, but that means you're onto something big. Ask yourself, as Doc Doug said, what is this trying to tell me? This is why dialogue is so important. Awareness is really powerful when harnessing transition as a catalyst to rewrite your life story. Because if it is true, what Bruce Feiler said, that we spend nearly half of our lives in transition, imagine the opportunity in that. So thank you, Doc Doug, for being my partner in curiosity and exploration. And as we wind down, I'd really appreciate it if you could lead us in that quiet moment of reflection as we allow today's chat to really settle and support us.
Sure. Thanks, Nikki. As I kind of reflected on how to do this today, I was kind of worried that people might start hearing the same sort of thing or get kind of bored by me doing this mindfulness thing. And you and I chatted before, and you said, I don't think this is going to get old. That it's maybe just part of the essential kind of bedrock of how we're doing what we're doing. So I just gonna trust you, Nikki, and trust my own experience too with just slowing down, how important that is, how essential it is to honor our need for, quite frankly, just some stillness with ourselves. Let's do that. At the end of this life quakey meeting, how about we all, inviting also our guests, our listeners, to just go inside and remember, wow, how nice it is just to slow down and be safe. And to do this, I'm inviting y'all, you too, Nikki, me, to think of somebody that you felt, that you feel completely safe with. Somebody with whom you could just drop your guard because they'd be there for you and accept you as you are. We need that throughout our lives. We definitely need that when life quakes happen. And as you've learned today, Bruce Feiler has reminded us they happen actually all the time throughout our lives. Where's the center? Where can we turn? Who can we turn to where we just feel safe? So take a moment and think about what it feels like to be with that person. And if you're struggling to think of a person that you feel completely safe with, let me remind you of why Nikki and I created this podcast. We wanted this to be your virtual living room. We want to be a place where you can turn to when you need it. This is your podcast. This is your safe place. So whether that's Nikki and me, our voices, or somebody that you're thinking of from now or before, just go to that safe place and listen to what those people sound like. Listen to what we sound like. Trust that actually the nervous system can be calmed from the outside in, straight through your ears. We can do this. We know that we are doing this. Mothers know it instinctively when they speak motherese, or to be fair, fatherese. That voice just kind of calms us, lulls us, and tells us, without even using the words necessary, you're safe here. Nikki and I want you to be safe here. But this is a place where you can come in your honesty about how life and your own transitions have buffeted you. And as you've learned or will learn in our podcast, we have our own share of experience with that. This is a place for all of us to slow down and say, wow. But there's still safety on the inside. It is there. And if you have a hard time finding it, if you couldn't think of anybody, again, we're here for this podcast. See you at future episodes or listen to all of our past episodes. Welcome to your living room. So back to you, Nikki.
Oh, Doug. I was closing my eyes and I said, well, that safe person is right here in this virtual living room with me. I hear your voice and I just feel grounded, seen, heard, and understood. So thank you for sharing that with everybody, but also for me, I feel particularly blessed. I'm having such a good time and learning so much.
We
and
smile a lot in our podcast too, if you can't see us, right? We're having fun.
But you can hear a smile. That's the thing. You can hear a smile, right? So that's fab. Lots of fun, and thanks to everyone for trusting us with this journey, and we can't wait to be with you again in our next episode. Thank you.
Right on. See you next time.